Okay, welcome to these new video interviews that Lawyers Weekly is running. My name is Jerome Dorasami. Today I'm joined by Trevor Withane, who is the principal of specialist insolvency and commercial firm Ironbridge. Trevor's also an award-nominated lawyer. He's been on the podcast with us a couple of times, so it's good of him to join us here for a video interview this time. Trevor, today we're going to be talking about the state of affairs for restructuring and insolvency in a post-election world, and also, given what's happening in the economy right now. Could you give us a brief outline of where we're at with restructuring and insolvency? There's been a bit of talk lately about zombie companies and other different things for director penalty notices. So yeah, where are we at?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me on, Jerome. Very good question. We've been talking a couple of years about when is a big uptick in insolvency work going to come. There was, as you know, a lot of government support and creditor leniency post-pandemic in the early days, and that lasted for a couple of years. And so even against what often people talk about normalized figures, so the pre-pandemic figures for formal insolvencies, which were already low, those formal appointments were even lower during the pandemic, which was, of course, entirely counterintuitive. And the theory was that those companies were being supported by government support. So in the Australian context, we were talking about JobKeeper. We were talking about the ATO leniency, not pressing to recover debt. And in fact, large debt has accrued with the ATO. We were talking about creditor leniency and changes in various statutory regimes, such as the regime for creditor petition statutory demands. Now, all of that largely has come to an end, yet we haven't seen a very significant uptick in the insolvency appointment numbers. And so the question is, why is that? And are we going to see an uptick soon? So we have gone through a period of great uncertainty, and now we're in a period of great unrest, in my view. We have, though we're Australia, we're the so-called lucky country. If you listen to the rhetoric coming out from the government now, and a lot of the comments, say, from someone like Penny Wong, we're no longer the lucky country. We are affected by the food price crisis emanating from the Russia-Ukraine war. We're affected by relations with China. It seems like there's going to be a period of greater tension between China and America. Those sort of global factors aside, locally within our own economy, what we've seen is we've seen the cash rate go up in just a few months. 0.1 in April 22. On the 3rd of August, it was raised by the RBA to 1.85. We see the cost of living going up, and that's of course a global phenomenon, and we see the debt in our country being very, very high. On the workforce level, we're struggling again. We're having workers go overseas. There are staff shortages, wage increases, which by the way is a good thing. But these are sometimes imposed on businesses who do not necessarily have the cash to meet those increases. So all of that, I think what we're going to see is a period of greater unrest. I think there will be a percentage of the population that will not be able to meet their mortgage payments. I did some calculations, and I think there are probably around sort of 2 million people who are in the hand-to-mouth interest-only category that could face trouble in the short term. And of course, business borrowing becomes more expensive, and global factors, interest rate rises, particularly in the US, I think will have an impact. So we've started to see some ripples. We've had ProBuild, the construction company, go down. We've had a number of insolvencies in the construction industry. I think that will be an industry that's particularly hit, as of course travel and hospitality will be. But let's get ready for increased economic disruption.
Yeah, absolutely. I like what you said there about going from a period of uncertainty to now a period of unrest. So what does getting ready look like for for directors, for businesses, for anyone involved in this conversation?
Yeah, look, one of the things that we're seeing is, and the ATO have been more vocal about this, is they are starting to take more enforcement action. So widely reported in the press a few months ago, pre-election, that the ATO had sent out some tens of thousands of essentially demand letters. And we're hearing of the ATO issuing 20 to 30 DPNs, direct penalty notices, every day. So what that shows is that at least the government creditor is starting to take more and more enforcement action. And so the period of leniency is arguably has come to an end or is rapidly coming to an end. And therefore, I think directors, along with their accountants and their lawyers, need to be realistic about their financial position, both now and into the future. And no doubt a lot of preparation and thought has gone into that already, and there may be very robust plans to deal with those things. But the head in the sand approach, que sera, sera, it will all be right, is probably not the right approach at this point. And so what companies don't want to do is receive a stat demand or a DPN and then think about what their options are. They want to be having a real cold towel look at what is our situation. Can we meet our debts now as they fall due and payable, and get the right help around, because many of these businesses will be good and they will be salvageable.
Yeah, absolutely. And a proactivity rather than reactivity is always a good approach. So what does due diligence look like moving forward? I mean, given all of these environmental factors that we're talking about.
Yeah, look, first and foremost, and I'm sorry to repeat the DPN issue again, but due diligence, I think, is taking a look as well at, are we up to date with our tax obligations? And certainly, are we up to date with our filing of tax statements and so forth, the reporting obligations? And that's critical, because if a company is behind on their tax payments, then and a DPN is issued, so long as the company has actually complied with its reporting obligations, it may well be able to put the company into external administration to avoid directors becoming personally liable. I think directors need to actually engage their mind in thinking about cash flow, particularly sources of income, support for the company if they're not in a cash flow positive position, engaging with their accountants to think about the configuration of their business, where they could save costs, what deals they can do with other creditors. I mean, for example, if the ATO is pressing for a debt to be paid, then it might be that debt needs to be prioritized and paid, but a deal can be done with some of the other creditors who may be more lenient. So I think you've got to be thinking about all those things, and it has to be also borne in mind that for many businesses, particularly SMEs, directors and their third parties will have given personal guarantees. So it's not always an option to say, well, let's just put the company into administration or liquidation, because it may be that the director or some third party, such as a family member or a subsidiary company, might be laden with the debt under a guarantee.
Absolutely. And is there a place for creativity when it comes to best practice, given everything going on right now?
I think so. I think there's always a thought for creativity within the law. So there is no one size fits all. It very much depends on the business. It depends on the market. It depends on demand and all sorts of things. If you're in the hospitality industry, for example, you want to be thinking about, what is going to happen? If we're heading into a recession, if households are actually cutting back on their spending, we're not all enjoying the government vouchers anymore, and those types of things. How can we be creative with our business model to find other markets or other ways of service delivery, knowing that attitudes are going to be changing? I mean, that's just on a practical business side. perhaps sort of restructuring practitioners, accountants would be better placed with those sorts of things. But certainly from a legal point of view, I mean, I guess it's just coming back to the fact that, it's not always appointing a liquidator that is the most relevant or appropriate thing to do. It's thinking about the business more holistically. Is it possible that because of the viability of the business that's understood, there could be, for example, a capital raise to inject more money into the business to pay down some of the debts, for example. Be thinking, engaging both, I think, with the lawyer and the accountant together. Just by way of example, how might some tax losses be utilized? There are lots of things to be creative with, and it's even being creative about the source of funds as well. So, if someone then actually does find themselves in a bit of a sticky situation, I think one has to think about, creative ways of perhaps raising money, going to the bank of mum or dad, and lots of people do that. The big point is, don't bury your head in the sand. That is dangerous, and often the people who come to us with problems where it's really far, it's just too late. It's because there's essentially been a period where creditors have tried to engage with them. It may even be people within their own business that are raising the alarm, and the directors essentially are either over optimistic, too busy to deal with it, or just simply don't want to deal with it and hope it will go away. And they seem only ready to deal with it once it's too late.
Trevor, it's been fantastic chatting to you, getting this snapshot on where we're at with restructuring and insolvency and where to next. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks very much for having me, Jerome.